Hi there, it's Patricio Phillips with Liberal Talk Radio, bit shooting at Patricio12, and of course, Plethora Productions. It would be perhaps remiss of me not to comment on the Ecuadorian presidential elections of 2021. Ecuadorian presidential elections, yes. Not to give an opinion, don't even think. More as an observer, an announcer. It seems like so long ago, and I suppose it is, when in early 2008 I attended a gathering where the then President Rafael Correa addressed a crowd in front of the presidential palace in Quito. He was a very controversial figure. Since then, we've seen the ideological wars that have characterized so much of Latin American politics played out right here in Ecuador. Populism, regional collaboration, and independence. Ecuador's relation to the U.S. versus sovereignty. This week, the outgoing President Lenin Moreno is in Washington, D.C., where he has been praised as a Democrat rather than an authoritarian leader. His government has received a AAA rating, so to speak, by the IMF and World Bank. And we are told Ecuador is now in super good standing in the world of finance. During 2020, Lenin's government took out lavish loans from these aforementioned institutions to cover the closures when the society took on structures not seen in Ecuador or Latin America since the bygone days of military dictatorships, but not authoritarian, according to the U.S. Senate today that released glowing praise of Lenin Moreno. It's not how it looks, because remember, some people have the flu, so the curfews and fines for teaching English are justified. Don't even think about having an Easter at church this year. We're getting good at online masses. But not authoritarian. No, Rafael Correa, he was the one that restricted freedom of the press, according to them. Moreno is a Democrat, and Ariel Sharon was a man of peace. But Julian Assange is a dangerous criminal. Actually, I'm quoting a letter written by a U.S. senator to President Moreno, while said journalist was a guest at the Ecuadorian embassy. This was before Moreno capitulated to pressure. There was pressure put on him from the senators to deliver Julian Assange, probably the same ones that are now praising him. But things aren't as they seem, and he's not authoritarian. An enormous work has to be done to keep people from seeing what is right in front of their eyes. The eyes are useless when the mind is blind. It looks like the two frontrunners for Ecuador's 2021 presidential race embody the ideological wars of the last 25 years. Guillermo Lasso and Andrés Arauz. Ecuador uses the dollar, and this process is called dollarization. It was the dollarization of Ecuador's economy. And those who had savings in the national currency, sucre, lost big time when they had to trade their sucres in for dollars. And the banker who oversaw the bank fair, as it has become known, was Guillermo Lasso. And so in the polls now, there's these two guys are remaining in front. Ecuador has 12 political parties. So Lasso has characterized his opponent as another Hugo Chavez. For example, "We don't want another Venezuela" is now the campaign slogan. And we hear this all over the place. Andrés Arauz, on the other hand, worked in the penultimate government of Rafael Correa before Moreno. He worked for the infamous Rafael Correa. Even though Correa handpicked Moreno to follow his policies and continue the citizens' revolution, Moreno turned right, gave up Assange, put many of Correa's politicians in jail, and slapped an international arrest warrant on the former president and his former friend, Moreno. Moreno, who lives in a wheelchair, is not running for president now. Since in Ecuador, voting is obligatory, in the sense that you get fined for not voting, although you're able to abstain from particular races by saying you'll wait till next election. But since there are more poor people than bankers, populism and promises of free money tend to rule the day. And in all fairness, Andrés Arauz, he calls this an investment. He wants to jumpstart the economy. Would it have been better if we hadn't gotten this recession in the first place? And we're going to talk about that in a second. But populism and bonuses tend to rule the day because there's more poor people voting than bankers. You see a lot of processions of cars promoting different politicians, and everybody goes to the voting booth. You have to, or you get fined. And Arauz has promised to bring back Rafael Correa, literally, because Rafael Correa right now, he's not allowed to return to Ecuador. And Arauz has promised to continue the pro-social policies. He is a young man and speaks 4 languages, and he is largely expected to win. He's refused to take a strong stand against Nicolas Maduro, and like his mentor Correa, is a proponent of regional integration. But with the tourism industry gutted, and with the mother of all recessions, he will have uphill work. Fortunately, there is a vaccine. He is talking about an economic recovery. Although the part of this video dealing with Ecuadorian politics as it concerns running for president is wrapping up, I'd like to finish by saying a word about how case numbers can be manipulated using RT-PCR. And the case numbers for this little flu can be manipulated in such a way to then say that a vaccine is effective. In this way, Ecuador is no different from most countries, but it's a microcosm of the world, and this is where I live, so this is my reality. When we first started hearing of corona cases in Ecuador, they would have PCR applied and then sent to Spain to be analyzed. And then they got their own machines. Great, we're modernizing, we're moving with the technology. Even now though, cases are kept high, and the vast majority of those who test positive report that they feel fine. And this is all done by labs in secret. Could it just be that they're not sick? Since you are doing to molecules the equivalent of taking a photograph and blowing it up to the size of a skyscraper, there are no control studies showing at what point you stop the cycles of amplification, which even mainstream virologists that believe in the official count say is bizarre. This is how the panic is controlled in places like Brazil, where initially there is pushback from their populist president, Bolsonaro. This is how the headlines across the world can continue to scare people with new cases. In short, in order to soon claim that the vaccine has been effective, all they have to do is lower the cycles of amplification, what the inventor of PCR, Kerry Mullis, called pandemic machines. It reminds me of a scene in the movie The Bourne Legacy, starring, amongst others, Edward Norton, Jeremy Renner. It didn't have Matt Damon in it, but it was my favorite of the Bourne movies. And you see this pharmaceutical company in the Philippines that's totally controlled by the CIA. And I wonder if that's how the labs are that process these nasal swabs. But don't worry, China's started doing butt swabs. I'm not kidding. Even assuming PCR is effective at determining virus, Its false positive rate is said to be upwards of 80%, according to Dr. Andy Kaufman and others. There needs to be transparency in the labs, which are major players as they process these nasal swabs and now in China, anal butt swabs. I'll close today with a quote from Peter Trudowski that I think is quite appropriate, quite apposite. In the background of history, extending into what is invisible and hidden, there is an enormous spiritual battle being waged. That which is outwardly visible is the symptomatic expression of this struggle. I have been and am subject to censorship. This has even affected how I make titles. I've had to go in different directions than I would normally have wished. Directions including I've had to go in directions different than what brought me popularity and growth. Please go to my BitChute channel and go to the various fan pages I have on Facebook. I was a September 11th truth activist in California and Oregon, and then I became aware of the overhead spraying, and it seemed Humboldt County was being targeted by weather manipulation, and I'm from Humboldt. I came to Ecuador in February 2008. My programs have been on public access, and if you've never heard of me before, it's probably because big tech cleans it up every time you have a hit. This is Patricio Phillips, and thanks for watching another edition of Liberal Talk Radio.